one of the biggest things before you even start changing the culture is providing a culture in the first place.
Welcome to the Cleaning Up Podcast, Millionaire Secrets of the Home Services Industry, brought to you by me, Ron Holt, CEO and founder of Two Maids and a Mop, America's fastest growing cleaning company. I get a chance to sit down with home service industry pros and other entrepreneurial leaders so they can share their stories, their insight, their experiences. It's so much fun. You're going to learn so much. You're going to be inspired to take your small business into a national brand just like I did. Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of Cleaning Up, Millionaire Secrets of the Home Services Industry. Of course, I am Ron, CEO and founder of now two consumer brands, Two Maids and a Mop, which is probably what I'm most known for. We have 87 locations across the country, and now a brand new consumer brand that we're just building up from its pilot stage called Pink Zebra Moving. And yes, it's a local moving company. I love the home services industry, but one of the things that is very difficult about it, and this is not some crazy announcement, are the people, the personnel, all the problems that come with that, all the headaches and stress that come from that can be very, very tough for an entrepreneur inside this industry to overcome. And so I reached out to someone that I thought would be a great resource to try to help us through that, because there are toxic people in every organization, whether it's blue collar or white collar. And today's guest, Pete Havel. Pete is the author of The Arsonist in the Office, Fireproofing Your Life Against Toxic Coworkers, Bosses, Employees, and Cultures. It's one of Amazon's hottest books. It's been on the bestseller list multiple times in multiple categories. Pete is a speaker, trainer, consultant for organizations, again, from nonprofits, law enforcement, and blue-collar organizations like ourselves, Two Maids and a Mop, and all the other folks listening to this show. So, Pete, welcome to the Cleaning Up Podcast today.
Ron, thanks for having me. Good to be here.
You bet. So, guys, hopefully you have a chance to pick up a copy of Pete's book. It's a really fun book. It's one of the books that, if you think about business books in general, for nerds like myself, that sounds pretty exciting. Sometimes I don't want to go to sleep because I just want to keep reading a lot of business books, biographies, whatever it might be. But oftentimes, most people think, a textbook that's going to put you to sleep, very dry. But a lot of folks, Pete being one of those, have decided to write books that are more story, like a real story behind it. And so I'll let Pete kind of tell the story. But one of the cool things about Pete's story is it's not a textbook, dry content piece of literature. There's a real story that talks about, for the most part, real life occurrences that has occurred in Pete's life. So Pete, tell us a little bit just introduce the book real quickly, and then we'll kind of dive into some of the content after that.
You bet. So The Arsonist in the Office is, like you say, it's my story about taking a job where everything looked great, and I quickly learned that it wasn't. I dropped people behind enemy lines with me into the professional experience from hell. Entered a job. I had considered myself smart and savvy. I come from the world of politics and lobbying, where you read people, you're watching for all sorts of different clues about what's happening with the elected officials you're dealing with, what they're telling you, what they're not. And I took a job where all of those rules went out the window, and found myself in a culture that was broken, where decision-making had completely smart decision-making had ceased. And I had to navigate it. And I had been hired to work with the employee that they had determined was so toxic, so volatile, so destructive, that they made the crazy decision that they couldn't fire this person. They were so bad, they were worried about what would happen to them from the outside, that they kept their worst enemy inside the organization. And that's who I got paired with. And it goes from there.
Well, it's a heck of a story, by the way, and I can't wait to kind of dive into some of the color behind it, but it sounded extremely intimidating. This is this brand new job that you're excited about. It sounds like the benefits were pretty attractive, and it's potentially a brand new career for you, and almost right out of the gate, everyone's scaring you to death with all these, really fear stories that this particular employee has caused prior to your prior to your time there, and now it's your job to figure out how to deal with it. That sounds intimidating big time to me.
That's right. And it taught me a lot of survival skills. It also taught me about, in the world of, as a franchisee, as a manager, a business manager, you're constantly learning. Not only are you relying on what you know, but you're quickly learning what you don't know. And right. that was one of the things I went through constantly. And some of those were my own assumptions that, the people I was dealing with were looking out for themselves. But I thought, well, also that because I'm a valued employee, I'm doing good work, they're looking out for me. And that may be the case, or it may not be the case. People's motives are what they are. Good people can have some bad motives at times, or they may be thinking selfishly. And you got to be calculating all of this into how you protect yourself. So that was a real learning experience, because I learned that especially if an organization isn't taking care of its culture, you've got everybody looking out for themselves and very few people looking out for the big term, for the long term. And that's where leadership can really have a big role.
Well, let's just kind of back up a little bit and talk about what some of the signs of a toxic workplace may be. What are some things that we can look across our own organizations to see where there may be some trouble brewing that we need to address?
Sure. A few of those are going to be, and again, very much in the wheelhouse of what a leader can do. But when you're picking your management, maybe that people at that second tier level, are they trained? And what I'm talking about now is more of a what tees up some toxic environments. If your management is untrained, you're relying on your management to control your culture, and as a leader, you may not want that second tier calling all the shots. Are you seeing signs of intimidation, retaliation against people, or are you having a process that deals with conflict more in a more constructive way? Do you have screaming and shouting matches at times? Obviously, that's not a healthy situation. Do you have clearly set rules and procedures on how things are going, or do you have essentially are you winging it? Not only does that create problems and confusion among the employee base, but it also sets you up for some legal liability if you don't have procedures in place. Those are a few big things, and here's one that maybe not as intuitive when I say it, but it'll make sense when I dig into it just a little bit more. And that is, do you have silence at times in your meetings? And where I'm going with that is, when you speak up about some sort of new initiative you're pushing, a policy you're putting into place, to the people that you're telling it to, are they giving you any feedback at all? And when you get that silence, when you say, all right, does everybody get this? Does anyone have any questions? Does anyone have anything to add? And you're hearing crickets. That may mean one of two things. It may mean you're the most brilliant, insightful leader of all time, and they get everything you're saying, and they're ready to go out and run through a wall for you. Or they may have mentally checked out, and you've got issues on your hand because people may not trust what you say. They may be waiting until after the meeting to talk about whatever you've been going through and decide on their own how they're going to do things. It may mean a lot of different things, but if you have silence at a lot of times when you have some of those key moments taking place, you may have some communication issues, and that is a big warning sign.
Yep. And I think oftentimes when people hear about these things, their initial instinct is to think that we're only talking about the high-rise downtown building with 100 employees that all wear white collars. I believe that the factory floor has the same potential. The truck that's out, doing a route has the same potential. It doesn't have to be inside an air-conditioned office, right?
That's right. And it can happen anywhere. I mean, that water cooler type of atmosphere people talk about is it could happen anywhere. Ron, the one that I should add to that, and this will absolutely make your point, gossip is a is a big sign of some toxicity problems. And again, that can go back to whether communication channels are respected, and that whether people wonder if what you say is what you mean, and if people are trying to instill other meanings into messages coming out of the out of leadership. That's also a challenge.
Yeah, and again, in our industry, the home service space, it's a pretty big deal because obviously all the work's done out in the field inside someone's home, or at least in someone's land, whatever we're doing there. It's not inside an office or a factory even. So there's a lot less control in our industry than what you see in a lot of industries. So if there is gossip or if there's any toxicity, that's going to even be bigger, I believe, because the stage is so different. I can off the top of my head, over the 18 years I've been doing this, I can already see in my head how this could be a real issue and you not even really know about it. Because if you've got a toxic employee and you send, in our case, we're two maids and a mop. So believe it or not, we send two people to clean a house. You send two people to clean a house, and one of those is your one of those is your arsonist, as you call it. By the end of the day, this other person who may, be an amazing employee who could have done great things for him or herself within the organization and for the organization, that person may be gone. They may just totally take off and fly away, all because of the toxicity caused by that person inside that car or truck or whatever they're traveling in.
That's right. And if if your customers are hearing it, their views on the value of your organization may be affected by that. So it can happen in a lot of different ways. Yeah, employees, customers, you name it. And right. Online reviews. If that person leaves, what are they going to say about you? And that's something I always encourage any company to look at, is see what your own online profile is looking like and see what your former employees and customers are saying. And that well, that how key that is, but any company ought to be looking at that.
I'm sure someone's listening to this and it seems so simple. You've got a toxic employee. This person's, spreading wildfires throughout the organization. Get rid of them, just get rid of them. But there's a lot of fear that comes from managing these people. Sometimes that fear is some legal liability. In other cases, there may be even some intimidation from the employee to the manager. And so how do we get past that fear to be able to do something about the situation?
Yeah. One of the big things is that a couple different things. One, take it for what it is, that this may be isolated. You may have one person that's that known problem, and you have to make the assessment of, is the juice worth the squeeze? How productive are they? Are they worth it to the organization to keep them around in the long term? But you also don't want to underestimate it. You got to understand the facts. And I talk about all the different ways that toxicity can affect a company's bottom line, and it's financial, it's legal, it's the traction and retention of employees, as we talked about. It's reputational. It is the productivity, and then all the physical and psychological health, everybody working there. So it's a big deal, and you don't want those fires to spread. But the biggest thing at the end of the day is making that assessment of, is this person somebody you want and need in the organization, and don't let that fire get out of control, because it's going to spread. I see this. I work with some other franchise groups around the country in terms of building a culture within their organizations, and it can vary from store to store. And you bring in somebody that may not be a leader equipped to lead other people, and you've got employees fleeing. You've got people that are those gossips that are starting trouble and causing other employees to leave. You've got all these messes, and at some point you can look at it as, all right, this person is a headache, but they may end up sending your people fleeing, all your good folks. And that's also one of the signs of a toxic environment is the good people tend to flee for two reasons. One, they're not enjoying work. And two, they may be looking at what's going on inside the company and drawing what may be the very wrong conclusion, but their conclusion may be, well, this arsonist is sticking around. Obviously, the leader is fine with it. And that may be wrong, but you can't blame them for thinking that way if you're not doing anything about it.
Yeah, when you say that out loud, it rings a bell for me, because our world is kind of, it's two different worlds that we operate in. Most people think of, when you think of a Two Maids and a Mop or any other large consumer service brand or organization, you think about the B2C, the consumer side of what we do. And obviously, when you provide a consumer service, there's employees that do the work, and that's kind of what we're focused on right now. Is one of your employees at the local level one of those potential arsonists that's causing a lot of culture issues? But there's another side to that we also operate in now that we're a franchise brand, and there are franchisees that are all connected throughout the country, and they lean on one another for mentorship, for direction, for advice. And sometimes that's very, very helpful. And in other cases, it's the opposite of that, and so I know most of what we're talking about here is literal employees, but there's a whole other side to that. Really, anyone that you lean on, anyone that you have to work with, whether it's a vendor, a peer, a small business owner, maybe it's not even a franchisee, maybe it's someone local that you trust, that you lean on for business coaching or advice. But if they're providing you with the wrong information or just the wrong mindset, that can be its own form of arson, right?
Absolutely. Well, and you look at the ripple effect of what happens. And again, this is a reputational thing, but it matters to organizations everywhere. But you look at, won't name their name, but a prominent name within the franchise world, and you have a couple of franchisees that have had sexual harassment issues, for instance, and it's now in the news everywhere. And it may be an isolated location, but everybody that's reading the article thinks of everybody's businesses in the same way. So yeah, taking care of those issues when they start just helps everybody. You don't want that reputational hit either. So it's a big deal. You don't want to be associated with bad behavior, even if it's 1,000 miles away, because it gets in the headlines quick.
All right, so we're going to do the $1 million question here. We get it. There's some problem folks out there that really cause a lot of havoc that's unnecessary, and it pushes people out in some cases. If it doesn't push people out, it creates a horrible culture that somewhat is hard to get rid of until that person is eliminated. So what do we do? What are some of the steps that we can start taking as a business owner or a leader to start changing the culture one step at a time?
Sure. One of the biggest things before you even start changing the culture is providing a culture in the first place. And I know your organization has some core values to it, and that you want those to trickle down. But if those values aren't getting down to the level of the employees, the people need to talk about it. The leadership within the organizations need to talk about them, state what they are, and have people know that they're part of something bigger. Because you can't fault employees for doing the wrong thing if they don't know what the right thing is. Well, in some cases you can, but some of it should be obvious. But you want those guidelines laid out, which does two things. One, it sets some standards, but two, it creates a pathway. If things go wrong, you can point to that and say, you violated XYZ. We want to talk with you about it. Maybe if it's nothing, too terribly serious, you can start with correction, but you may need to take additional steps from there if they're not understanding what the basics of the job are. But yeah, setting that basic standard is going to be important for all sorts of different things. But it starts to build into, provides more purpose to the job. If people are excited about their job, no matter what it is, it's going to provide some value. You find these days, and there's been surveys done to show this. If people feel like they're part of a bigger mission, they find value in that job. They may say, you know what, I may be able to get an extra couple dollars an hour doing work for somebody else, but I feel like I'm valued here, that I'm respected here. I'm going to stay where I am because my purpose matters. So that's a big deal too. But when you find people that aren't a fit, make that decision, have your procedures in place, and when it's time to cross the line into either termination or serious correction, be prepared to do that, and know that that you've done the best as a leader to get them there. And if you haven't, evaluate yourself and make sure that you've provided all the training and correction necessary to get to that point.
That's hard. That human nature humans all want to take the easy path. I want to take the easy path. Who wants something hard just for the sake of it being hard? But it's hard. It's hard to have that conversation with someone that's really creating a poor culture. It's really hard to maybe even terminate that person and risk all the legal liability that may come with that, risk what kind of fallout that may come from that. There may even be negative PR that comes from that in some capacities. So, the hard part in this case is the right direction, but I think most organizations, it's just so much easier to just turn the other cheek. Do you see that often?
Oh, sure. Absolutely. People instinctively do not like conflict. I mean, most of us don't. Some of us thrive on it. But the successful people are usually going to be the ones that have the ability to have those hard conversations. And I would urge people that if they're reluctant to go that route, start with preparing on their own side to know that they are doing all the right things, and that that correction is the last resort. Make sure that you've got the processes in place to teach people all of the right things, and then go from there. And that's a little bit easier. You don't have all the self-doubt that some people have of just feeling hopeless in trying to deal with these problems. I'll give you a pathway which was started by a guy up at the Vanderbilt University Medical Center, and he was tasked with putting together something to deal with some doctors that were just wheels off in their behavior and making life difficult for everybody. And the medical center said to this gentleman, what you need to do is you need to provide us some sort of a pathway to correct these doctors. They're arrogant. They're just causing so many problems. Give us something. And he put together what's called a disruptive behavior intervention system. Fancy way of saying 3 strikes and you're out. And here's something for your folks that may be looking for something to feel better about making those corrections. The first step is basically kind of a cup of coffee type of meeting. If you have somebody that's acting up, sit down with them and say, hey, you know what? I'm seeing this issue popping up. You need to work on this area, and just casual conversation. Next step is if those behaviors are not being corrected, go to them and say, we talked about this before. I'm putting something in writing for you now. I want to tell you it's important. You need to work on this, and we'll help you with it if necessary, but this needs to be changed. Next time around, if it's still happening a little bit later, go to them again and say, hey, this is serious. We've talked about it before. This is the 3rd time we're having this conversation. Boom. Here are the steps in writing that you need to take to correct it. And if not, your employment or pathway to promotions may be at risk. And if it comes up again, we gave you every chance possible to deal with this, and you've not done so. I'm sorry. We're going to have to make a decision to either demote or terminate. And it's something that is so easy, so simple to understand. You've given this person multiple opportunities. and it's that glorified 3 strikes and you're out type of approach, and very simple. And you've got organizations that are adopting things similar, and it is sure not rocket science, but any employee will get it and would encourage it.
Yeah. The key is doing it. The key is actually not looking the other way and assuming that it's going to go away by itself. And in our industry, again, turnover it's rampant. It's always been a big issue in all of the home services industries. There's not one immune to it. So we know it's hard to hire. We know it's hard to keep people motivated to stick around in a job. For the most part, blue collar industries don't pay as well as white collar industries. And it's hard. Sometimes it's outside. In other cases, it's inside, but it's still hard work. You're bending, you're sweating. The last thing you need is someone that's making that even more difficult. So why not focus on creating the right kind of culture? And you talked about it earlier, this idea of vision. We talk about it here all the time. I believe that everyone, from an entrepreneur to the folks working for that entrepreneur, need purpose in their life. If there's purpose, people will do big things, and people will believe in themselves. People will believe in what they're doing, and they'll be proud of what they're doing. But if there's someone inside an organization that's inhibiting that purpose, you'll never be able to see or feel that as an employee or as an entrepreneur for that matter. So you might as well do something. And that's literally, I know you laid out 3 steps, but that's step 1. Do something, and do what most people don't do, which is something.
You got it.
All right. So I'd like to get a little, you talked to some practical examples there. And if you got a few more minutes, I'd love to ask you a couple of questions on just the practical side, and whether it's your own personal life or professional life, or some of the case studies that you've learned from, being in this space. What are, if you could just go back in your mental Rolodex and really think of one just crazy story that can make us go, holy cow. I know there's some in the book that are pretty crazy, but I'd love for the audience to hear just one really crazy story that maybe it makes them feel better about the situation once they hear it.
Oh man, where to begin? I do Google alerts every day for words like toxic workplace and crazy coworkers and all sorts of things, and the stories that are popping up just daily. I've got some horror stories. Some of them are just absolutely amazing. But here's one that is so simple, but it comes out of a company called AmerisourceBergen, and they had, and this is one of those things where you just wonder what people were thinking. So AmerisourceBergen distributes drugs of all kinds. Cancer drugs, all sorts of medications, you name it. And they had a guy that was the chief operating officer of the company that had some concerns about the way that company was dealing with cancer drugs. Essentially, the deal was every vial of this drug had a little bit extra on it, right? About 20% extra, just spillage or whatever. And the company looked at all this spillage and said, you know what, we can make some money on that spillage and make if there were 4 vials, we're going to get 5 out of it, and we can sell the extra one and make some more money. Well, that was neat and all, but it caused all sorts of problems from a legal standpoint and all sorts of other things of what they were doing. And this one guy, his name was Mullen. Mullen kept on shooting his hand up in the meetings and saying, this is not a good idea. We could get sued for it. We could get regulators coming in, et cetera, et cetera. Everybody's just shaking their heads and being like, oh, come on, this guy's saying the same thing again and again and again. And they go and fire him. And he had raised that concern in so many meetings, and he gets fired, and he says, all right, guys, I'll see you later. Walks into a federal government office and becomes a federal whistleblower. And sure enough, he was right, because AmerisourceBergen becomes the source of a federal investigation, gets fined $875 million when all they probably should have done was paid attention to what the guy was saying and not retaliate against him. But it was a heck of a valuable lesson. And
sure.
government steps in and says, yeah, Mullen, you were right about all of this. And all the concerns maybe should have been listened to. But valuable lesson in if you've got employees that are raising concerns that are going to protect you, listen to what they have to say, and at the very least evaluate their interests.
That wasn't just that wiped away people's personal fortunes. That's tragic. So yeah. So if anybody's listening out there and you've got your own issues, just know that others have had worse issues. All right. So I got another fun one for you. This is more blue collar related, and so this is more actionable as well. So I alluded to the car. The car or the truck is such an important part of the blue collar world, because again, you meet in an office typically. Some blue collar businesses meet in a home, or maybe they just meet directly at the customer site. But either way, for the most part, you're inside a car or a truck for, in some cases, hours every single day with a coworker. If you're the good guy, if you're the person who says, like in your case, to the pharmaceutical company, don't do that. How do you stand up without fearing for your own personal future? What are some steps that an employee can do to protect themselves, to make sure but to also protect the business?
Yeah, one of the ones, if we're not talking about your company in particular, but any company, is learn what the ground rules are of the company, learn what the culture is, and in some cases, learn whether it's okay to speak up. Because with the right companies, the right cultures, it's okay if there is a concern, especially if it's one that's going to affect the company, that you raise it. But you want to know, who your manager is, what they're like. Are they somebody that's okay with you coming to them and saying that there's an issue? You certainly want that from your employees, and you should want that from your employees. Everyone should, if there's issues out there. But if you're that person that every day is running into negativity, know that no matter what your situation is, whether you're at the top or at the lower levels of a company, know that life is too short sometimes. And if you're in the wrong situation, put yourself in the right one, and be careful as you're doing it. Don't become that negative person, and make sure that however you handle things, you're going to be coming out with a good reference or a neutral reference out of a company, and be that positive voice as much as possible. If you're in a tough situation, be that person who is going to be additive and positive, and not become part of the problem.
Well, Pete, I love your book. I love the message and content within it. I think every leader, every owner of a business, blue collar or white collar, should have a chance to read it, because, quite frankly, I think the leaders of an organization's job is to drive and develop culture. And that culture is going to develop whether you want it or not. So you might as well get in front of it. And sometimes that means doing some very difficult things, having some very difficult conversations, and doing things that don't make you happy, because they're painful in some cases. But that pain obviously takes you to a place where you're removing that pain as well. So I believe every leader should have a chance to read this book, because I've seen it in my own personal life prior to my entrepreneurship world. I can relate to some of these stories inside your book. And quite frankly, I've seen it even here at Two Maids and a Mop, where we have 1,300 employees across the country. It's not hard to find someone that is causing some issues that really needs to be addressed. And if you don't do anything, it boils and boils and boils. And like anything, when it boils too much, there's problems. And so if someone is out there and they want to connect with you, or quite frankly, just buy the book, what do they need to do to do that?
Sure. They can connect with me through my website, which is petehavel.com. So Pete is my first name, last name spelled H-A-V as in victory, E-L.com. They can get me through there. My email address is pete@petehavel.com. And they can connect with me either way. But you're absolutely right. Attitude matters. culture matters in a big way, and it trickles down. And if you're not asking the right questions when hiring people, finding out who they are, and doing just like Southwest Airlines and Two Maids and a Mop and other great companies do of asking those key questions and hiring as much for attitude as it is for any skill, you're missing out.
That's right. And that's the best news. It's never too late. You can, as you say in the book, you can always rise from the ashes, even when there's an arsonist in place. So it's never too late to do something and to improve the culture and get to a great place for your organization to grow and thrive, and for everyone within it to also have a great experience while they're working there. So, Pete, great book. Thank you for your time today. I hope we get a chance to talk again down the road. And great book, and I hope others listening today have a chance to read it like I did.
Thanks, Ron. Appreciate it.
All right, thank you.
Hey guys, Beth Lovett in Business Development. If you enjoyed this episode, then please share with your friends, and don't forget to tune in to the next episode of Cleaning Up. Have you ever wondered if you wanted to be in business for yourself? If so, then don't hesitate to give me a call at 205-789-8027 or email me at bethl@ineedamaid.com. And if you just want a window shop, then you can see us online at twomaidsfranchise.com.